Regular listeners to the Foreign Desk Explainer, like there are any other kind, etc., will recall that last week we did Greenland with regard to US President Donald Trump's coveting thereof. This week it's Panama, and for much the same reason. So we should start by reassuring listeners that the Foreign Desk Explainer is not planning to pivot to becoming a weekly analysis of President Trump's proposed annexations and conquests. There will not be a Canada episode next week, or a Gaza episode the week after that, or who knows, a New Zealand episode the week after that, or a Pitcairn Island episode the week after that, or a Third Moon of Saturn episode the week after that. But Panama might be the one he is semi-serious about. Recently confirmed, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio made his first trip in his new role to Panama earlier this week. We shall return to this, but a brisk history lesson is probably in order first, by way of illuminating Trump's curious grudge against Panama. President Trump is, as we well understand, a man principally animated by a vast range of curious grudges, mostly rooted in some usually altogether imaginary slight against himself personally or the United States generally. Where Panama is concerned, it is all about Panama's Canal, which Trump appears to regard as American by right. His case is, basically, America built it and that settles it. On the first part, at least, he is correct. In the early 20th century, shortly after Panama became independent from Colombia, the US bought, for $10 million plus $250,000 more a year, what would become the Panama Canal Zone, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and thereby sparing seafarers the long, arduous and frequently treacherous schlep around Cape Horn at the bottom of South America. A Panama Canal had been attempted before. France tried to plough through Panama circa the 1880s, but it had proved ruinously expensive and eventually unjustifiably dangerous. At least 25,000 canal workers were lost to yellow fever, malaria, and other hazards lurking in the Central American jungle. The US also spent a fortune and lost many lives, 5,609 of them, many immigrant labourers from various Caribbean islands, but they got it done. On August 15, 1914, the SS Ancon, an American craft belonging to the Boston Steamship Company, recently renamed for the new Waterways Pacific terminus, made the first official transit through the Panama Canal. However, the relationship between Panama and the US was frequently uneasy. The treaty signed by Panama and the US in 1903 awarded total control over the canal zone to the United States, which prompted considerable local resentment, not least as Panamanians struggled to perceive any economic benefit to hosting this American asset. In 1964, 22 Panamanians died in 3 days of riots, prompted by the refusal of Americans living inside the fortified canal zone to fly the Panamanian flag alongside their own.
We are here to participate in the signing of treaties which will assure a peaceful and prosperous and secure future for an international waterway of great importance to us all.
Successive US administrations grew to feel that running the canal had become more trouble than it was worth. It was President Jimmy Carter who in 1977 signed the treaty which would lead to the restoration of the canal zone to Panama by 1999.
That fairness and not force should lie at the heart of our dealings with the nations of the world.
It's a bad part of the Carter legacy, but look, he was a good man. I knew him a little bit, but that was a big mistake. Giving the Panama Canal to Panama was a very big mistake.
It is far from impossible that it is the very fact of Carter's involvement which vexes Trump. Of all the US presidents Trump considers his inferiors, i.e. all of them, his most seething resentments seem reserved for those who won Nobel Peace Prizes. But Trump claims that his concern is that the canal is now run by China and that Chinese troops have been stationed along it. Listeners may take a wild guess at the amount of evidence furnished for either assertion. It is the case that one Hong Kong-based company, CK Hutchison Holdings, does operate ports at both canal entrances, along with firms from the US, Singapore and Taiwan, but this seems an implausible casus belli. Nevertheless, the United States military does know the way. The US invaded Panama on Christmas Day 1989 to unload Panama's then-dictator General Manuel Noriega. Though a long-time US asset stroke CIA stooge, Noriega had become a massive pest. He had been indicted on cocaine trafficking charges by American grand juries, was suspected to be double-dealing with the Cubans, and was attempting to overrule a presidential election in which Panamanians had declined to elect his preferred puppet. This intervention is chiefly recalled for the farcical scenes which ensued when Noriega sought refuge in the Vatican's diplomatic mission in Panama City. US troops, doubtless aware that the optics of blowing the gates off the papal embassy would be difficult, instead rigged up speakers and bombarded the opera-loving tyrant with noisy rock and roll, including Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle, The Clash's version of Sonny Curtis's I Fought the Law, and inevitably Van Halen's Panama. Noriega eventually surrendered and spent time in jail in the US, France and Panama before dying in 2017, aged 83. Current Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino does not appear to require quite this level of persuasion. Following Secretary of State Rubio's visit to Panama, Mulino agreed to review CK Hutchison Holdings' operations at the canal and to end Panama's participation in China's vast global Belt and Road Trade Initiative, which is both a reason and a means for projecting Beijing's influence abroad. This is, probably, on balance, not a bad result, and Trump is entitled to call it a win for his dangling people out of the window approach to diplomacy. However, with due recognition that it feels like 6 months, we are only 2 weeks into his new presidency, and the difficulty with bluffing your way through politics is that someone or something is going to call you on it eventually. Though it would be understandable, all things considered, if Trump has come to see himself as an exception to this rule. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Mueller.